Ballet school, which now which when he was in Akebrygge. So at that time, so yeah, so I studied choreography, but as it was within stage art, it was pretty mixed at that time. So in a way, we had lots of groups which worked with many different elements. I'm a bit messy now, but I will come down and organize it. So yeah, I'm not gonna go but I started before that mainly dancing with starting with hip hop and street dance, and then I started at school more learning about choreography and stuff. As I don't know, you probably know a bit, but the choreography school then even now, I mean, I can call it a bit traditional. It doesn't mean traditional in a bad way, but we really learn the skills of choreography, very basics. At the same time, the main teacher, which is still there, Anne-Grete Eriksen, she, in a way, you could do whatever you wanted. So it was not like you had to dance. I mean, we had to dance classes at that time, but I made performances which didn't have any movement in it or something like this, and it was okay. So it was not strict in this sense that you have to do movement. But I have a movement money, so it's okay. I finished the school in 2000, and then I wrote a certain manifest and I started a company called Impure Company, which is my company, and this company had a manifest, and what provoked most of the thing was that I wrote art equals politics, and then this became always a huge discussion, what it meant and stuff. I think in the beginning I was not so, conscious about I think I was very interested in politics all the time, and then I was doing with art, and I never understood art in itself because I was never in art business in a sense. I danced hip hop in the streets, so I still have really difficulty sometimes when I go to see installations and stuff. I really don't understand it, or when I go to theater, I don't understand it. Even when I do my own work, most of the time I don't get it. So I have this kind of within the process, I always have to arrive what I call to a point that it's worth nothing. So I have to understand the non-importance of what I do to be able to do it. If you understand. So we can start with very big questions, and then I have to arrive in the process at the moment where, in a sense, that what I do is worth nothing. It will never change the world. It will not do anything, and then I can start work again. So for me, it's important to arrive to this moment of non-importance. A certain kind of, I feel then I've come to a ground, and because I can be pretty pretentious and blah blah big words. So it's nice to break myself down at certain points, and then yeah. So then this art equals politics, without understanding it, it really, there's one seat there. No, sit. So this art equals politics followed me extremely after that. So without actually knowing it when I wrote it. So everybody was asking, when I was touring, everybody was asking, and they still do, what it means and why and stuff like this. So in one way it must be conscious, because when I also chose Impure Company, of course, this is directly after the school, so then I had to write it must be something negative. It cannot be, because it's contemporary art, so it cannot be positive. So then I had to find something like this, and then when I wrote Impure, first I want to call it Damaged, but then there is a company called Damaged Goods by Meg Stewart, so I could not do that. So I was pissed with Mag for many years. No, I'm just joking. And then I said unclean and impure. So I started writing, and impure became a nice, because also they have this kind of connotation of Bible and uncleanness in a sense of religious impurity, like it has much bigger thing. So the funny story, funny, is that I made performance. My exam piece was really like a big performance with 6 dancers and 6 live piano players, really pretentious and really trying to be this this big choreographer shit thing, doing very dancey stuff, which probably many people had seen before, and I really thought I did something like, yeah. But while I was at school, I was doing many other performances which I never put value on. So every year I made a solo for myself, which I showed, and these was crazy things like, I don't know, I changed the public seats around, or I wrote reserved on all the public seats so people could not sit on it. And I was doing lots of crazy things which I never took seriously, because it was just not things that I'd seen, if you know, like, I was traveling, I worked 3 years before I started school, and I saved like 150,000 krones, and I had the choice between not taking a loan when I went to school and use this 150,000, or use the 150,000 on traveling these 3 years that I went to school. So I chose to take the loan and use the 150,000 to travel. So I traveled every summer, and every opportunity that I had, to festivals, different things that I watched. I was very pushy, so I was always knocking on the doors of choreographers and asking to go to rehearsals to see how they're working and stuff like this. So I managed to actually be in Pina Bausch's company for 14 days, in Foresight company. I was like extremely, like totally not, very nerdish in a way, and not understanding any social shit. Just like going and just asking about seeing rehearsals. So even people who were very difficult, I remember I waited for like 2 hours to meet Anna Therese de Keschmacher to see the rehearsals. And so I never said anyway, and so I used lots of money on that, which actually became, afterwards I understand that it became very good for me PR-wise also, because I'm not a typical looking dancer, so in one way everybody remembered me in the classes or something. And since I was loud speaking and knocking on everybody's door, in a way they remember. So later on, when I made the work, luckily the first premiere was very well good, so everybody knew about this fat fuck Iranian guy who danced. So then it became, yeah, we met him there in that festival. So it really like exploded heavily, also market-wise in this sense. It was okay. So yeah, so back to this story, that I made this performance, which I thought it's gonna be really nice. I mean, it was very good in the sense of technically, and you know, working with 6 piano players and all this kind of yada yada which stage has. But and then BIT Theatergaragen in Bergen asked me to make a solo, very like, you know, like just nothing. And I remember I managed to gather 20,000 crowns and then made the solo, which basically started with, I sat down and I wrote, and this is still how I work with the solos. I basically write everything down within a month. I almost do not rehearse, and I am piss scared when I'm starting a premiere, and I am basically within the 3 first shows I make the performance in front of the public. But the structure is already done in beforehand. So in Bergen I had 6 different performances put down, and then of course Second Intifada in Palestine started at a similar time. So I want this political shitty that I didn't want to do premiere at all. I just wanted to talk about this, and you know, like very provoked by it. So, but I had to make a performance. So it was funny because I was talking, I had images of myself when I was young, like very young, with my father and me in the photo, and some text of Beckett that I was working with. And then since I had this father and son story, it was this image of the father who holds his son, which has been shot by the Israeli. It came out, and then I could reuse this image in a sense relating to me and my father. So I found a way to bring this image, which was like really like the image of a Second Intifada in all newspapers. So I made that performance, which in a way I never took serious. not serious in the sense that I'd never seen a similar way of working before, so I didn't know if this fits in at all or not, all this kind of thing. So, and it became a super success, if you can call that. And then I made the name in a way for myself, and it toured, and then basically I managed to get lots of co-producers, which still I work with until now. So it basically settled the career after that, and then my confusion started after this, because what I thought was good of I did, it was not at all. So I had to in a way find what was good with that performance that I did with the solo. I don't have so much images of my performances because I normally don't carry it around with me. So yeah, take my words for it that it was great. No, it had this kind of, there were things in it which already had been within dance and performances, which basically this kind of extreme body, using of a body in this extreme way. So I had extremely rough material, which I still have. It's not aesthetically enough within dance in the sense that it has to look beautiful, or it has to fit in within this kind of what's called set forms, but in a way the formats arrived out of this kind of, yeah, just rough way of moving, and also extreme way, I mean, like using the body as what I called, that for me it's always nice when the body become a flesh or organs, never like, not, because I don't know in dance if you have seen it or something, or in theater, body is really like this kind of sculpture that stands there, and it's always beautiful, and it doesn't, however you do deal with it within dance, it just looks good. So, and I always had problem with dance that I work with that they look good anyway, you know, that whatever it is look good. So I always had to work with dances that they manage to look ugly, but not in a just like. So we worked a lot with how to become heavier all the time, and body shapes, which and also worked a lot with fear. I felt this kind of idea of fear, that we could set things, but at the same time open. So my first solo started by, and within dance you have had this kind of people like Wim van de Cable, so many other Belgian dancers which were rolling heavily, and they were, in a way it looked like they're hitting their body pretty much. And then you had of course Jan Fabre coming with his psychotic way of working from visual art and into the dance and theater. But then I had this course with a French choreographer called, oh my god, Joseph Najd, which actually is not French, but he works in Orly, I think. Orléans, I think so. Orléans. He's actually, I think, Czechoslovakian or something, and he's very, very good choreographer. He had a person with him called Taribé, which is working with martial art, and he was working with us to fall like one piece, which within dance you always fall through your center and then to the floor and out. So I started my solo basically standing, so if this is my back, to fall like one piece without using hands or anything. So I started with this kind of movement, which you really throw your body into on the floor, hitting it, and this kind of thing. At the same time, being very aware of where are the limits of, because also again within dance you have this kind of psychosis, in the sense that you always see these dancers going wild and they losing themselves, and you have this kind of a strange empathy or sympathy with this dancer. So it becomes very self-centered around this suffering of the one on the stage, which I hated it. So I had to find this balance between extreme control and technique, and this playful with public's, how to say, wanting to help, instead of this kind of getting this kind of empathy with me, that oh my god, the poor boy. And then, you know, of course they always use this, my history, that I came alone to Norway as a refugee, and then everybody had this kind of way of thinking that you could read everything into this kind of poor Iranian boy which came alone to Norway, how was it? And I hated this. And it's really like ridiculous questions. It went okay, as you can see. So it's just like not such a big questions in a way. At least for me, it's just other fascination. I have no problem earning money out of it, in this sense that I have no problem that it's used. I was at a lecture in Amsterdam 5 years ago where I talked about the value of the work every time Iran did something wrong. like now, you know, with this weapon thing, it's fantastic because like there's always somebody calling you, almost like there are theaters that, you know, maybe like I talked with Iranian director friend of mine, Amir Kwastani, which is in Iran, and in the last year he has gotten, you know, calls from like a national theater in London, which basically book their program like, you know, 2 years in advance, but something happened and they call him up and say, do you want to make a performance in next month in London? Because of course he's Iranian, coming from Iran, atom, blah blah blah, it fits very good, they can advertise it. So I think market-wise there is always something there, and I have no problem with milking it. I had much more problem with it in the beginning, but now it's like I feel I know how to talk about it. So then it's okay for me to deal with it. In the beginning, not at all. I did not. I mean, they were. I've never denied my background as Iranian, but I was like in Norway. I was pushing extremely that I studied here. I'm from here, so they could not actually put me into this foreigner bracket, and they never did either afterwards. So until I felt comfortable, because I have this thing with this thing that I decided very early on that it's me who decides when I'm a foreigner, when I'm not anybody else. So, and this is a weapon that in a way I have against Norwegian society, I mean any foreign society, is my advantage as a refugee or as a foreigner, and not anybody else's basically. And this is mine to use. So you can. So these things. Yeah, so going back to the work, so I started working with this thing, and then politics started arriving into the performances, much more what I call politics. So I made work in 2000, which basically, within at least, I don't know, most art scenes, talking about politics was really a taboo. We have had 9/11 and many other things which in a way push the society to in a way, if they want or not, to discuss some thing. At that point was extremely like, you know, art, within art itself, lots of politics. How is art politics continues, but I never was interested in that. So we had this Intifada image, and every time we made this political thing, it really made big discussion. This was the scenes that nobody liked, or even some people liked, and they were always discussing it. It never fit in the performance. But I had this theory that whenever I want to talk about something, I just talk about it. And even if I don't find an artistical format to talk about it, I'm just going to put it in. So it was like this kind of, how to say, a way that what I think is important to talk about is most important, not the art making. So if it interferes with the art, it just has to interfere. That's the way it is. And of course, when you make these kind of rules within the theater, then you basically start composing differently. So it becomes part of the composition. And sometimes you find very pathetic and stupid solutions for them. And I knew at some time that it was really bad solutions. But again, at the end, I thought it was most important to talk about it. Especially when I started getting no more Iranians which were working in Iran and then coming out and understanding what does it mean to work under censorship. And then I started putting like censorship of art shit on myself. It was just stupid, if you understand. Comparisons, it's if you make something that you can be put in jail or your work cannot be shown, I can understand that. But if I start to censor myself because I'm not correct within the art scene, then art scene cannot put me in jail and they cannot cut my subsidy. So anything. So I was thinking like, what the fuck am I afraid of actually? And why should I do this at all? Based on what reason? The thing is that after a while, within the 10 years that I worked, the last work that we had became very clean. In both, so in the sense that 2 years ago, I was in Brazil for a month to what I called work, which was basically sit and write for a month basically and watch everything again that I've done for the last 10 years. And what I saw that from in the beginning, everything that disturbed the performance was included. So the Intifada or whatever that could happen around me, which could disturb the performance, I was just including it in the performance. So the performance became very like broken. The idea was constantly broken. The composition was constantly changed, and it really looked like somebody just like cut open something and just forced this idea into this thing, you know. So then, and the whole thing and everything was shaken, you know, because we had this heavy discussion, and then people were. So we worked a lot, and then I saw the last performances. Everything had become very much clean. So everything which could disturb the performance was excluded. So we made a text which was about this fantasy country, that we made the manifest for the country, laws. Then the country goes to war, like just very simply said, and then the country, instead of going to the war, the people decide that they were going to leave their country. So the idea was that when the country gets attacked, the country says, I'm not going to go to war, because to go to war is such a radical, it demands such a radical change of me and the way we choose to live. That's why we're not going to go this, so we're going to leave, which basically means death. And then they die at the end. So, and then at the end is this character which is blind, which comes back and in a way finds this country left in a way, and how things, and it's like this kind of story about how things lives on without us in it. As, in a sense, I don't know. Walter Benjamin, I read this text by Walter Benjamin called The Task of Translator. I don't know if anybody have read it. It's a really nice text, so I definitely recommend it. And in this one, he talks about, there's a point he talks about that, he talks about unforgettable event. So, unforgettable event, even if all mankind forget about it. So it's a certain idea that at least I read it as that there. I think he means that there are something in some events, by the nature of the event and how it happens, that even if all of us forget about it, it will still be remembered, because there is something in the construction of the event that it will not be able to be forgotten. Something like this. I mean, Walter Benjamin is sometimes writes extremely in between poesy and philosophy and goes back and forward. So it's just. So I thought that this is an interesting idea that in a way, if we leave this place, the chairs and tables and stuff starts to continue, you know, like we are not here, and they will behave a certain behavior. That also I felt that something to do about tracing, that things that you touch or something, they will have a trace, and then they will continue live in one way or the other, this trace. So that was the last part of the text. So the idea was that when we made the performance in the beginning, that the performance was made like this, that every 20 minutes we will take a break, and we will give a text to a public. Public will read this story, part of the story, for 10 minutes with the light on, and then we will go back to the performance. But logistic of this work was so difficult and disturbed the whole performance in such a way, and at the same time that we were having this thought, the performance built itself in such a strange way that it became this machinery that could never be stopped, because we made the performance in fragments, and then we put it together, and then it's really melted in such a way that it just could not be separated. So then I excluded it. So this was my turning point, that something strange is gone. Something strange is, at least for me, I call it the alarm, that I'm started excluding everything that disturbs this performance. So that made also the performance pretty clean. I don't think the performance was not bad at all, in the sense the performance actually was extremely radical, in the sense that we worked. If I go back again, and I will come to this point, is that in the beginning of the work, it was one big issue that I had. My issue was that the performance, whatever idea that comes in my head or whatever material that I use in my body is never a problem. So ideas are never a problem, and material is never a problem. So what is the problem is the people, the ones who are doing it. That's the problem. So if you start with the production with this thought, is basically you start fucking everybody and yourself up. during the performance, so during the rehearsal. So if you are the problem that I'm working with, so we have to fix you. And this how we started for the 3.5, 4 years. We went into the neck of each other. We were working in different places. We were working sometimes we didn't know how many hours in the day we work, so we could work 12 hours. We never knew when it's finished, when it's starting, and it's, you know, like you wrote lots of essays and then you were questioned by these essays, what is it you like, what is your meaning around these issues that we work with? And there were always issues about power, violence, war. Basically that's mainly things that I've been working with. So we went heavily on this kind of thing. After a while, when you start working like this, I found that the problem becomes that when I ask that you are the problem, I also put the persona in a center. So just to understand, it's not that I was totally outside of the thing and I started manipulating everybody like this. So I was a director of the performance and I work very hierarchical. I don't believe in flat structure, stuff like this. I believe that structures should be flattened in the sense that we start with a certain positions between me and the dancer that I'm working with, and after a while we started finding what we're going to work with, and everybody works for the idea. But to arrive to an understanding of this idea, we work back and forward. But at a certain point, I decide that this is it, and we're going this way. So you can argue as a performer with me actually pretty long time before. So even if I decide that this is it, it doesn't mean that you shut up. You can just continue nagging and wanting to change it until, let's say, a day before premiere. But at the same time, there's this kind of idea of hierarchical, but it's like a mix of, you know, hierarchical at the same time, respect of the others and stuff like this, at the same time not. So it's a bit, I mean, we cannot get into it because it's more complex about relation between when we work. But yeah, so anyway, I don't believe in flat structures at all. So that's just, I think again, flattening the structure, it means, for me, it means that after a while, if it's a good relationship and it's good dialogue, it's not about, I don't know exactly who found the idea sometimes. And sometimes my job as the choreographer or director is not about having these ideas, it's just waiting to somebody comes with the idea and say, this is it, we go for this now. So it's just different way. But anyway, going back to this persona, so when you ask this, you are the problem, you put the person in center, which also means you have to buy everything that this person comes with. Basically, relation problem, family problem, everything enters the work. And this became a much bigger problem than I thought, because I don't want to deal with your everything, and the other people don't want to deal with my everything. So it started to become extremely not productive at all. Or it took pretty long time before we arrived to a problem. What is actually the problem? This is one thing. The other thing is that we understood that some dancers actually carry the trauma of this extreme fight going into each other all the way into the shows. So basically you go on in the performance and you don't perform what you have made. You perform the trauma of questioning of your ideas or what it is, and this was not good. Mm-hmm. You had performers who could really like divide these two, and you could go on their neck and you could have a huge fights and negotiation, but everybody would leave it to the side. But there were performers which really like could never divide themselves between the one who does it and who is working and who's private and all this kind of thing. So I stopped after 3 or 4 years about this way of working, because again, after a while it just had enough, and you see the productive of it. The production of it was actually, what was very good of it is that you could really see the intensity of the dancer's body, which affected the whole material. So the dancer went on stage with extreme memories, psychologically and verbally.